Gentleman's recognized.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think it'd be helpful to provide some context and perhaps help clear the record a bit, because I've heard differing arguments from my colleagues on the other side, some of which are grossly inconsistent. So, you know, my friend Mr. Massey makes the argument, which I actually think comports with the language of the final rule, that this final rule requires registration. But then I hear my colleague from Wyoming declare that it outlaws these devices. Clearly, that's inconsistent. And, you know, I think Mr. Massey is actually correct on that front. And I think that it's important for us to have an intellectually honest debate. By that same token, my friend Mr. Issa, who's not here earlier, but referenced the Obama administration. I believe a number of my colleagues have done so with respect to the genesis of this rulemaking. No one has referenced the fact that this rulemaking began, at least in part, during the Trump administration. And so let me just take you down a trip on memory lane. In March of 2020, during the Trump administration, a manufacturer submitted a firearm equipped with brace model SBA-3 to the ATF for classification. ATF determined that it was subject to the NFA as a short-barreled rifle because, quote, all of the objective design features are consistent with weapons designed to be fired from the shoulder. That's evidenced by the many videos that my colleague, Representative Cicilline from Rhode Island, showed, and that it defies any of the arguments that were made on the other side of the aisle with respect to the design of the weapon on that front. ATF examined a firearm with a different model brace and reached the opposite conclusion. By late 2020, still during the Trump administration, ATF concluded that there was a need to provide clarity to the firearms industry and the American people on how ATF evaluates firearms equipped with stabilizing braces, and that some manufacturers were adding to the confusion by falsely labeling braces as, quote, ATF compliant when ATF had not evaluated them. ATF determined that for these reasons, and due to the extensive use of these firearms to create short-barreled rifles without following NFA requirements, it was necessary to issue public guidance. This is important. On December 18th, 2020, this is during the Trump administration, not the Biden administration, ATF published a notice in the Federal Register entitled Objective Factors for Classifying Weapons with Stabilizing Braces. That guidance included factors similar to those that are in the final rule at issue in this markup. As you all know, I know many of you signed on to the letter. A few days later, on December 22nd, 90 House Republicans sent a letter to the ATF imploring the ATF to essentially rescind that guidance. And the ATF then ultimately complied. And on December 30th, ATF withdrew the public guidance. 3 months later, a murderer in Boulder, Colorado, used a Ruger AR-556 pistol equipped with an SB Tactical SBA-3 stabilizing brace to kill 10 people, 10 of my constituents. I represent Boulder. I think many of you know that. One of those constituents was a police officer who bravely lost his life, made the ultimate sacrifice. I'm disappointed by the majority's decision to pursue this resolution. I don't get it. And for those who are watching, it's 12:15 a.m. in Washington, D.C. I think the American people can get a very clear picture of the priorities of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, many of whom I consider to be friends. We could be taking up bills to address inflation. We could be taking bills to build safer communities. One of my colleagues talked about the steps to harden schools, to provide security assistance to places of public accommodation. That's something I support. I've introduced a bill for 2 years in a row now. I've been able to get a single Republican to co-sponsor it. But instead, we're here debating a measure to undermine federal law enforcement's efforts when it sought to crack down on those who were using stabilizing braces as short-barreled rifles to evade the NFA. That's it. I would hope that the majority would reconsider their priorities moving forward. Let's work together to find some solutions to these consequential challenges. But this isn't it. That I can assure you. I yield back.